Deborah, are you on the line?
Yes, we're on the line. I just clicked in, so I'm just.
Fantastic. All right, I think we're good to go.
All right, well, hi everyone. This is Whitney Austin Gray. Thank you, Anka, so much for that wonderful introduction, and hello to the virtual cyber world out there. Hopefully we'll have a chance to connect with you. We're coming from DC, which is where the International Well Building Institute and one of the Delos offices is located, so hopefully we'll have a chance to see lots of you folks up here in maybe even in November for Greenville. But until then, bear with us and we'll try to give you as much information as we can about the human health design intersection and how the Well Building Standard is a tool for that performance. So before I get into that, I wanted to start by just giving you a little bit of context and background as to who we are. So I think it's fair to describe me a little bit as a design groupie. I come from the field of public health, so my PhD was in that area, but I've long sought after this design and health intersection, fundamentally believing that designers play a critical role to shaping health and wellness of the population. And so in doing so, my current role here is leading research and innovation, but also wear many hats, and I'm also at Georgetown teaching this and come from working with architecture firms and innovation institutes, predominantly in the healthcare market. And I also would let Deb give a little introduction to herself as well.
Hi, I'm Deborah. I have a background in technology and data. I come mostly from the digital humanitarian world and the business improvement districts. My work has mainly been around smart cities and how to use data and technology to make cities more livable, more walkable, and more equitable.
Great, everyone. So we're just going to dig in here today, and we'll look forward to some questions at the end of the presentation. So I think the best way to start this conversation off is to really ask the sort of larger question. So I kind of like to say that it's like going back to the birds and bees, and it's really important at this stage because we don't often think about human health in this way. But I like to ask, how are animals supposed to live? And I think that's a pretty clear thing, because when we look at this slide, you look at the environment on the left and the environment on the right. And I hope that if I was to quiz everyone here, you guys would not fail this in saying that the environment on the left is probably much better for the animal. In fact, what's interesting about this slide in particular is when animals first moved into zoos, we actually saw their lifespan, which should have been prolonged because they no longer had threats in nature, actually was shortened, because in these environments, these sort of concrete block type zoo environments that were fenced in, is that there was so counterintuitive to their nature that was actually causing a multitude of impacts, which clearly had an effect on their health. And so demonstrating just how critical environments are. So I hope you guys know that's about where I was going to go, and saying, okay, so we know there's certain environments that are better for animals, then how are humans supposed to live? So the office environment on the left is not the right answer. The office environment on the right is getting a lot closer, is one of our arguments. So, as you look at the picture on the left, do you want to work there? Like, what does that evoke for you? And the reality is that many people work in environments just like this for no real good reason in many ways. This is just the way that we've designed office buildings. We have agreed to sit in cubicles, gray cubicles that don't have daylight, that basically have issues even with sound, and we sit in these gray cubicles day in, day out, 8 hours. We're not standing and moving throughout the day. These long corridors, we can't even orientate ourselves well to sort of what's happening, outside during the day, because we're sort of locked in these interior core environments. So we think there's a much better way to do that. And I mean, again, back to the giraffe, right? Understanding what are the environments that actually support our health in the highest level. So what environment supports healing best? Coming from the healthcare industry, we know we could do a lot better. In fact, I would argue that two of the highest levels of human functionality are around creativity and healing, and it requires everything you have in order to obtain those levels. And I think, as many people on this phone probably know, is that when you're in a stage where you are sick or you're not feeling well, issues such as heat, temperature, so acoustics, lighting, all those things impact you more than they typically do. So you can imagine in really acute stages of healing how critical that is to your recovery. We would argue the environment plays a very important role in that recovery process. The last one here is what environment supports movement. So basically the one on the left is like, I mean, that's an all-out are you actually going to survive that? Crossing over 4, 6 lanes of traffic at times, and I wish this wasn't a real picture, but it absolutely is. And I think a lot of us have been confronted with environments in which it's easier to actually get in your car and go across the street to the outlet than it is to walk across the street. They're not made for humans, they're made for cars. Whereas on the right, clearly we're protecting users. This is an example of a complete street. So for those maybe not as familiar with the urban design scale, what's really critical is that you're removing these hazards from each other. So you're not putting the car right next to the bike, because a more frequent injury is when that car door opens, a bicyclist runs into it. So you're just separating some of those hazards away. But one environment clearly supports movement, the other does not. So it's important when we think about health and design to consider this issue from every scale. So you just saw a couple examples of that. Today we're going to be talking a lot about the building scale, but clearly there's the neighborhood and city scale. And my argument from the health perspective is that to ultimately provide health, you have to understand how a person moves between these scales, essentially. Oftentimes we'll hear this sort of, if you have a healthy building, that creates a healthy person. Well, kinda, except that healthy person still has to get to work, right? And then you have to think about what resources are outside the building to encourage physical activity throughout the day. And all of these things are really critical. In fact, early on, you heard arguments against LEED around energy efficiency, that you could have a really amazing energy efficient house in the middle of the desert, right? So we understand that that's a little bit more complicated. It'd be better to locate a house closer to an energy grid, and for a variety of reasons. We need to be thinking about understanding health and wellness beyond just the building alone to all these different scales. I love this slide because I think it drives home a pretty powerful point around your zip code is a greater predictor of how long you will live than your genetic code. This research came out in 2014. It was sponsored by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And you see here a map of our fabulous DC. And the drive home point essentially is that a matter of miles away from each other, you're looking at difference in how long you live. That's pretty significant. DC, I mean, you're really seeing a span there of what, 7 years. Other places such as New Orleans are much more striking, where you see a mile away equals a difference, I think, in upwards of 20 years in lifespan. So when you look at this, you should be thinking things like, how does the environment make that much of an impact? How does place make that much of an impact? And clearly there is social determinants that are part of confounding that scenario, where there's certain areas clearly that are more impoverished than others. But it does bring home this concept of where you choose to spend your time, and if you have that choice, what kind of impact does it have? We can dig down much deeper here and get to things like the toxic release inventory from the EPA and look at what areas are zoned to be exposed to those as compared to others. And so clearly place matters. And I think the drive home point here is how important place is becoming as we look at chronic disease conditions in this country. So on the slide here, you see the top 5 leading basically causes of death in this country. What's important to know here are these are chronic disease conditions predominantly. We have moved from the world of infectious disease into chronic disease. Some people even call these lifestyle disease or lifestyle choice driven outcomes. But the point is, you cannot go to the hospital and get a quick fix. Predominantly, it's going to rest in behavior change and environmental aspects that are going to be driving your influence here, particularly on the severity and how long and critical these diseases can last. The example of this with cardiovascular disease, you need to be thinking about diet change. That does not happen in the hospital. That happens in your home environment. If you live in a food desert, you're making it even more difficult to be able to access that food, especially if that food desert is not safe to walk at night. So you're looking compounded effects that the environment plays in creating positive behavior changes. And that's why it's so critical to be thinking beyond the hospital when we're looking at trying to address chronic disease conditions in this country. So my argument is that all the leading causes of death and the leading risk factors for death are related to the built environment. So here's my hot list. These are the leading causes of death, so we covered those, and the leading risk factors for death. So I think what's kind of fun, I oftentimes will lecture and talk about this, and we can really work through every single one of these risk factors and link it to the built environment. And the argument here is that what a huge role designers, architects, planners play in actually having an impact on those. So let's just take one of those. Let's take an issue of urban outdoor air pollution. I think that's a little easier one, but just for the sake of understanding, how close do you live to a freeway? What exposure levels do you have there of carbon, for example? What happens, like I talked about the toxic release inventory, how close do you live to factories? These are all components around asthma, clearly, and so this is a related factor that clearly we see a built environment issue. I will make a side note here. There was some interesting research I heard out of Harvard a couple years back where they were actually putting GPS in asthma inhalers to try to understand where exactly did you have an asthma attack. And they were trying to trend this towards certain locations. So, you know, really interesting area of research as well that we'll continue to see develop. So these are the 4 determinants of health. These are broadly defined from the public health field. We look at the environment, behavior, genetics, and access to health care. So the question to you all out there in cyber virtual world is, do you think these are equal contributors to your health? Do you think that's 25% environment, 25% behavior, 25% genetics, and 25% access to health care? So I hope you're sort of calibrating this thinking, well, there's probably one that's more dominant than the other. But rarely do people actually realize just how dominant healthy behaviors and environment are. Those constitute upwards of 70%, and I even argue higher than that, when it comes to your health, particularly those top 5 leading causes of chronic disease conditions in this country. Only 20% is related to genetics. People are often surprised by that, and even a smaller amount is access to care. So what's interesting about what you have in front of you now as a slide is that we look at, okay, so if we understand these are the leading determinants of health, shouldn't we be spending in these areas? We really want to address chronic disease conditions in this country. Well, shockingly, or perhaps not so shockingly for people on the phone, that when we look at the national health expenditures in this country, and this is at a 2.3 trillion right now, that's about 20% of GDP. That's actually looking at being upwards of 2.7 now. Only 4% of that is spent on healthy behavior change and environment. So we talk about the Affordable Care Act and we look at some of these key issues. This is one of those slides I think that you can revert to and saying, wait a minute, clearly we can see where there's been some impetuses for change to try to direct more efforts to population health management that look at issues like how do we reduce risk in home environments for our very costly patients, because we understand how critical behavior and environment are in order to reduce some of the expenses around chronic disease management in this country. So I think this is a nice way of saying we have lots of friends now. Back in the day when we were looking at design and health and the intersection is that we actually worked pretty closely together up until the 1950s. I think many folks are probably familiar with Olmsted. Olmsted was really one of the founders, landscape architect, known for Central Park in particular, and went on later to run the Sanitary Commission in this country. But he was really unique, and he was a landscape architect interested in health. So we used to hang out together all the time. Public health, medical professionals, design professionals, like we understood that there was something about place and health that was critical. In the 1950s, that really split, and that's for a variety of reasons, largely contributed to these issues around moving towards understanding the technologies that had to do with prescription drugs, for example, much more of a focus on the clinical one-on-one care with the patient, and sort of moving away from more the upstream population health approach. And in doing so, it can be argued we sort of lost that connection. But we're finding it, and that's what I mean by saying we've got friends, because at the WELL Building Institute in Delos, we're very focused on the design health intersection, and I'd say that it's only really been in the last 10 or 15 years that we could look to see that there's been an increasing cadre of professionals that intersect these two disciplines, and I think we continue to grow. This slide just documents what has happened in the last 10 years even with population health, and what other organizations and groups have come along in order to support this movement forward. So this is a pretty powerful quote. It's one of my favorites, that it's estimated that in the future, designers, planners, architects, and engineers may have a greater impact on the public's health than physicians. So I always like to kind of pause here. That's a big one. And the argument here, of course, is that if you're looking at behavior and environment as driving chronic disease conditions in this country, the physician is not the one best suited to make environmental changes. I think we are. That's not to say we don't need the doctor. I often make the analogy, it's sort of like the fire department. You want to build your house so it doesn't burn down easily. At the same time, if it does, you want to have a fire department. We want physicians to do what physicians do best and be there in times which we need that immediate care. We don't want physicians having to see patients day in, day out, regularly repeat patients are coming in every week because of asthma issues that are clearly happening in home environments in which the physician at best can treat but cannot prevent because they're not in the home environment. That's the role of the designer, and that's a very powerful role. And I will just make a comment here, which I think is really important, is that the former Surgeon General, Boris Lushniak, I think was a huge proponent, our current Surgeon General is as well. In particular, Boris Lushniak made the comments around engaging the public health community and the design community and saying we need you all to work together because we're really going to address these conditions in this country. We need you guys to step up to the plate. This was made in an AIA forum, the statements around designers being public health advocates and leaders. So I challenge everyone on the phone today. I don't know if we have any health professionals that are joining us, but I challenge all of you, if you have a doctor in the house, to go home and ask them about this and say, what do you think is the role of the built environment in health, and how do you think we could best work together? And I think it's a really provocative conversation, and feel free to lead with this quote, and let us know what you find out. So this is a diagram really just meant to demonstrate how complicated the field of health and design is. It's not meant to be an eye exam by any means, but it is meant to show that health is at the center and that health is more than just environmental health, which is encapsulated in the greenish tone to the right. Health includes mental health and wellness. It includes security and safety and physical health. So if we're actually going to think about all the ways the built environment influences health, we need to be thinking about it from all these different components of health. We also need to be thinking about it from every building typologies and scale. So what this means is that people that are working with our close partners at USGBC that look at issues like asthma in buildings. So you actually work in the built environment and health. Our other friends that work on issues such as obesity in the neighborhood environment and safe streets and complete streets, they also work in the built environment and health. And that previously these two professionals oftentimes felt that they worked in different fields, right? That one was a different scale, one was the building, they looked at different aspects and they did different kind of research. And the argument here is if we're really up to, I think what we are very passionate about at the WELL Building Standard is a movement around health and wellness in the built environment. We have to understand how to be inclusive of all design professionals from all scales, as well as all types of health professionals that hail from different disciplines. Historically in health, you are trained particularly in a field or department. Therefore, if you find a researcher, they'll often say, I'm an asthma expert, right? Or I study obesity. We don't have any, I'm a built environment expert quite yet. We are hoping that that group of individuals start to emerge where they are able to understand how the built environment interventions impact health outcomes across the board. Cool, all right, so that really takes us to talking about the WELL Building Standard, and something I'm very, very passionate about and really, really excited to share with you guys, because for so many years I've been talking about this, and the reality of the situation is I've never met an architect that said to me, Whitney, gosh, I really want to design an unhealthy building. That's what I want to do. I want to design a really unhealthy building. Not at all. Everyone's saying to me, yes, I want to design it. Like, yes, I understand this. Like, I understand that this is powerful. And frankly, many architects intuit a lot of this information already. The challenge becomes, how do you do it? So we know people are willing to pay a premium in the market for a healthy building. So we've done enough research to understand there's about a 10% premium, particularly with certain age groups. Those boomers of ours, they really are willing to pay that 10% premium for a healthy home. We know that some millennials are also willing to pay a premium for a healthy workplace. What does that mean? And furthermore, just because you quote-unquote design a healthy place, that doesn't guarantee that it's not value engineered out later in the design process. So great intents, but not great execution. Clearly there was a gap in the market called we need something that is order provides us a tool in which it takes us from the good intentions, it applies empirical research and best practices all the way to the execution of the building, of the place to really support health and wellness of those building occupants. So drum roll, then hence emerged the WELL Building Standard. So we released version 1.0 publicly in October 2014, and we have been super busy ever since then, working to evolve that standard. We actually are now in version 1.1 because we heard a lot of great market feedback from folks, and so that'll be upcoming and will be available. And we have lots of projects that are really just excited to say, yes, I want to do health and wellness in the built environment. How do I do it? Give me a path, give me a strategy, give me an approach. And the WELL Building Standard has met that need. So I want to spend the next couple minutes just running through how do we apply all this health and design research into a standard. So I started with, why is design and health important? We understood how are people supposed to live best? What are issues with chronic disease? And hopefully I've made the point to you at this stage that it's really critical design professionals be part of shaping the future of the public's health. How do we do it is now where we're at with the WELL Building Standard. So the WELL Building Standard, really important things for everyone is that it is a performance-based system, which means that we are not prescriptive in the standard. One of our features, for example, is we'll talk about issues such as beauty, right? We don't pretend to define that for you. We think that beauty can be a lots of different things, and so we're going to look for you to apply that and then demonstrate to us that you have applied it. And we have other standards that are much different than that, which I'll kind of get into, but it's an example of making sure that we are performance-based and we're not prescriptive. Likewise, and unfortunately this happens way too often, and we definitely get a lot of this in the research world, just because you said you're healthy doesn't mean you are. And that's not necessarily your fault. You can be the most amazing designer in the world, and you can design a LEED Platinum building with the best intentions in mind. And real world experience here, guys, people come in with their aerosols, they come in with whatever, their chlorine bleach wipes, they come in with their formaldehyde-laden furniture, again, all completely true stories, in which, although to the best attempt to prescriptively put forward design interventions related to health, in the end of the day, performance-based wise, you're not able to achieve an actually improved environment for the occupants. So from our perspective, it's very important that we actually come in and we will complete a performance verification after you go through the WELL Building Standard to make sure that you meet those levels that we put forward. And we will be testing on site. Those tests focus on air quality, water quality. We will do acoustics. We'll also do lighting along with several other spot checks. And you'll understand a little bit more what I mean when I get to going through those features. So you can kind of see where it applies. But a big take-home point for everyone is that we are performance-based, and that's really critical when it comes to demonstrating that the design interventions had an impact with the occupants. So this quote, we spend 90% of our time indoors. You know, when I was doing this 10 years back, I'd ask people, have you heard this quote? And I'd only get a couple hands. And these days, most people have. And I think some people take this and think, oh, that's so depressing. And it is a little depressing, frankly. There is this like, oh, I really wish I was in nature more often. I was outside. But I also see that there's an opportunity in this, which is that if you do spend 90% of your time indoors, it's time you get really smart about your dose exposures. So if that's where you spend the majority of your time, hence the majority of your life, and you don't think that aspects around lighting, heat, air quality, acoustics, temperature are not going to have an impact on you, then you really need to think again. People sort of take this for granted oftentimes, but are not actually proactively thinking about how environments impact their health. So we see this as a huge opportunity. So for the WELL Building Standard, what's really important is that we are standard based on health and wellness. We partner with USGBC and LEED. We partner with the International Living Futures Institute, and we are very open to continued partnerships and alignments, such as Cradle to Cradle, for example, which we support as part of our standard. We are not meant to be in competition with those. We're actually meant to be very synergistic. So if you download our standard, you will see in the appendix, it will actually list down which ones of our features are synergistic with the credits in those different systems. So you go for one, you can go for the other. Point in case is that the Phipps Conservatory is the first building to be LEED Platinum, Living Futures, Living Building Challenge recognized, and a WELL Platinum building. So they've gone for all three, and we are very supportive of being synergistic. We are also deeply partnered with USGBC to help us roll out this standard. So for those on the phone that are used to LEED or have gone through that process or LEED AP themselves, they'll find that going through the WELL Building Standard, becoming a WELL AP, is very much aligned. We heard the market loud and clear, and we are trying to make it as easy to do this. We don't want to add something else in that way, but at the same time we recognize there just is nothing else out there at this point to this level that provides a roadmap for health and wellness as it relates to the built environment. And so it's important we have that standard and we have the criteria in order to support a very robust implementation of that standard in the market. So now I'm going to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty here for everyone. So there are 7 concepts to the WELL Building Standard. There are 102 features to this standard, and it is set up in such that we have preconditions, which are basically prerequisites, and then we have optimization. So that's sort of our lingo. The reason it's important we use those terminologies is because we need you to meet preconditions in every category. In fact, that's what makes us very unique, is that we will argue that to be a WELL building, it's not enough just to have great air quality. It's not enough even to have great light. You really need to be thinking about this across all of these concepts. I think there's a great example. We saw this happen to LEED, best intentions, but. So the best intentions in that was that we, when we had these large buildings where the core of the building really wasn't receiving any light, there were strategies to reduce a lot of the sound masking, ceiling tiles, so we could reflect light into the core of the building. And that, really, it opened up offices, and we did get that reflective light into more of that center of the building. However, we lost a lot of sound masking, and then we have an acoustical issue. So from a human health perspective, have you achieved the actual intent of being able to benefit the occupant through design interventions? Well, actually you haven't. You've really only looked at one aspect of health. And in fact, if the acoustics are so bad, people will only talk about that and they will not talk about light. So we recognize this is a challenge, and that's why we want to help you navigate this by requiring preconditions across these concepts that will help you understand some of these issues and synergistic relationships around design interventions, so that you make sure that you're actually creating an optimum environment for human health and not just focusing on one aspect of human health. So if you guys can kind of go back to the circle diagram I showed you earlier, that's why it's so important. We want to be able to focus on whole person health across these different concepts. All right, great. So the air section for folks, this really is our largest section. It contains features that focus on air quality as well as materials. And you're most likely to recognize this from LEED. We really partnered very closely in this section. So you can obtain credit for both LEED and WELL for lots of the air quality features. So what I want to point out that's a little unique with the air quality section is that we look at chemicals in which we absolutely know that we need to get out, right? Then we look at potential chemical source materials that we should get out. We have reason to believe, precautionary principle, enough research, dose effect issues in which we're going to support that you try to reduce your use of certain chemicals in the materials and specifications on the project. And we do that through more collaborative, open partnerships. That's definitely the red list. That's cradle to cradle. That's looking at, living building and how can we, cross-sect with some of those other features that they look at to try to support transparency in the market. We also really want to see that you are detecting issues around air quality and you're sharing that information with your occupants. So we will actually give you a credit for displaying issues around air quality and the sensors in your environment to all occupants. So we're looking at this issue of what happens when you provide occupants information about their environments and how would they potentially respond differently. So we have that also built into the standard in the air quality section. And finally, I just want to point out very specifically that we do have several features that focus on mold and mold prevention. We do not touch mold remediation, but we do look at mold prevention issues. I think it's also important to note for this, and I think it's a good time to do that, is that we are extremely supportive of a mechanism in the standard called alternative adherence pathways. That basically means that you think that you can meet the feature by doing something different than what we put forward in the standard. So this is an issue. Like, I was in Qatar recently, and they have a very different environment. So we're looking at moisture mitigation. They're going to potentially have different strategies, as we would in somewhere such as Georgia that looks at humidity differently. So in those situations, clients will actually submit an alternative adherence pathway and say, we think we have a better way of doing this for our project. And we are very supportive. Each project actually has several free AAPs that they can submit, and that is our way of addressing issues such as regional variation, and very supportive of this. It's also a mechanism for us to learn about new ways to apply and new intervention strategies that meet the intent of the credit. Okay, so moving on to water. So water, what we're focused here on is actually not preserving, conserving water sources. That is very much lives in LEED. That's why we complement those systems and Living Building Challenge. But for us, we're focused on, do you have safe and accessible water to drink? So we look at this issue of, once it leaves the source, your water leaves the source supply, which is your waterworks company, for example, it goes through all these pipes. And these pipes are, these are extensive systems throughout the United States. For example, if you laid these pipes back to back, they'd actually circle the world 40 times round. That is how dense our water infrastructure is. Unfortunately, we rate at about a D+ as far as how good that infrastructure is. That means how much those pipes are leaking. We have issues around heavy metals in those pipes, and it is a significant problem. And so without going too much into that, the point here is it leaves the source, it gets to your faucet, what happens in between? And can you be assured that by the time it gets to your faucet, that it's still the highest level that it was tested for at the source? And so we're going to put in some features here that support you being able to make sure that you're filtering water, that it's clean. In fact, we even have a feature here that will look at the taste of water. There are, I'm sure everyone here, you know, there's a situation where you've been told, hey, this water is totally safe, and you drink it and it just tastes metallic-y or off, or I can name certain cities in this country too that are worse than others. So just because it's safe doesn't mean it's drinkable. It doesn't actually encourage you to drink. So we look at taste, we look at accessibility, we look at the quality of that water. So nourishment section is something we're really excited about, because I think there's too often that you hear about the LEED Platinum Hospital, and I'm only picking on LEED in the sense that they've been such a game changer in thinking about issues in this way that it just helps us to accelerate our own movement and being able to collaborate with them, because we have understood some of these issues. So as a LEED Platinum Hospital, fantastic, you're sustainable, amazing, and you tell the whole world that you're a healthy space, except you serve fried chicken. And yes, I get it, the cardiologists stay in business, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're actually supporting health and wellness for the occupants. The WELL Building Standard is not concerned with removing all of your favorite foods or removing your favorite sodas or your fried chicken. We just want to make it harder for you to eat unhealthy and easier for you to eat healthy. So we're going to do things such as ask that the organization, when you are working with a vendor, or if you have a cafe on site, we will ask that you do not provide serving sizes over 8 ounces of 30 grams of sugar, basically soda. If you want to bring soda on site and you're an individual that works there, you're welcome to do that. We just don't want to provide it for you on site. Very similar to smoking policy. When we think about you can smoke, it's just harder for you to smoke. And that's an example of environment driving behavior change. We also will do things such as, if you have a cafe on site, we'd like to see that you're advertising healthy foods, that you're serving smaller portions, that you're offering discounts for healthy food, and that you're encouraging people by using things such as like quick lanes for them to check out. So they come downstairs and think, wow, that vegetable plate looks amazing and it's cheaper and I can check out faster. Wow, those are all the reasons I need to be able to choose that. You can still have your fried chicken if you want. So light, let there be light. So we are really focused on issues around getting light into the eye. That does not mean light into the building, it means light into the eye. This is a challenge, so how do we do that? And what we're understanding more about melanopic lux as the measurement that we use, but essentially this is taking, light levels and translating them in a way in which we have a better understanding of how they would impact the human eye. And we're looking at IP RBCs, which essentially is a mechanism in the eye similar to rods and cones. But the mechanism of the sort of third aspect of what the eye can do is that it's monitoring circadian rhythm. So IP RBCs, blind people will have, I mean, they clearly have this. It enables them to react from their circadian rhythm throughout the day, light and darkness patterns. And we're just understanding how critical it is that you have access to sunlight during the day or to light levels that mimic sunlight to help you understand how to stay more inside of the natural rhythms that you have. In fact, we're understanding now issues around biological darkness, meaning that people that are shift workers are sort of off their rhythm, and in doing so, that actually is a potential risk factor for breast cancer. So really important, we're going to look here at issues around glare. We're going to look at trying to get that light in your eye. We're going to look at color quality. We'll be looking at just all these kind of components. I would also point out too, we've learned in green buildings that you can have a curtain wall with everyone that has light. Unfortunately, it does not mean people want that kind of light, and they pull the shades down, the shades don't go up. So we have to go further to understand how you actually are able to get that light to occupants in the proper way. So fitness, we want to encourage you to be active throughout the day. That means standing at your desk if you want to. It means free address, moving to different spaces to work. It means that there's a gym on site or there's exterior built-out structures that encourage you to get moving during lunch. We all know sort of the commercial office park that's in the middle of the highway. We have a really notorious one out here at Delos, and you go to that building and you are stuck. Short of getting in your car, that's it, right? You're in that building. So if you don't have a reason to get up, if you don't have a reason to move throughout the day, you'd be surprised that 8 hours pass and you're pretty stationary throughout the day. That does not just have an impact on issues such as metabolic rate. It also has to do with oxygenating the bloodstream. It has musculoskeletal issues with how long you sit. So there's really a multitude of issues around how your body is not meant to be inactive for long periods of time. So building an environment that supports activity throughout the day is really important. Comfort concept here. You'll be familiar with most of these. We will go all the way to looking at olfactory comfort. Acoustics, we really have several features that focus on this. We understand all the concerns around open office layouts and trying to really, there can be too loud environments, too soft environments, and essentially we're trying to empower the users to choose the environment that meets their needs best. The mind section is probably my favorite section. At the same time, I think it's also a challenging section for us because we're trying to look at issues that look at protocol in the workplace, such as sleep policy. We're looking at travel policy. We're looking at equity issues in the workplace. We're also thinking about things such as biophilic design. But overall, we're understanding this issue around stress. Particularly environmental stress issues and how the workplace can better support stress recovery and how critical it is that you're not constantly firing at a high level for, again, a multitude of reasons because stress, of course, exacerbates all major chronic disease conditions. So we're thinking about how the environment can play a role in that. Great, so I want to sort of end up here with some general comments of the WELL Building Standard, and I also want to tell people if you're interested, I know I'm going through this pretty quick, so no worries, we'll be around. You can write us questions and we'll do our best to answer. We also have the wellcertified.com. We have a 1-hour overview online. The WELL Building Standard is free, totally free, which is so cool to download. And we have the WELL Building Certification Guidebook. We have tons of resources for you. Come join us at a WELL Building seminar, a WELL workshop. We'll be a green build. So lots of opportunities. This is really meant to be more of an overview of understanding these issues around design and health and sustainability. So I hope it at least meets those needs for everyone. And any further details, we'll do our best to answer today, but definitely there's more opportunities in the future, so do not fear. We've released the Corporate Commercial Standard as of October 2014. I wanted to make sure everyone knew that we are all about new and existing interiors and new and existing buildings. So we love renovation projects. In fact, CBRE, our first project, was a renovation project. We are doing pilot programs in retail, multifamily, We're looking at corporate commercial kitchens. We're also looking at restaurants, and we will be moving towards thinking about healthcare and neighborhood development here in the future. So those are all standards that are up and coming. The pilot program is open to anyone. It was a great opportunity to get involved with us and really work with us from the very, very beginning. It's a very iterative process. So if you have a project that's on the books that you want to work with us on, please let us know. So finally, I just want to end with saying that I think here I could speak very broadly that for Delos and the Well Building Institute is that we are really about the movement of design and health. We recognize that we play a small role in this, and that our partners such as AIA, those that are working with NIH, for example, people, our Living Building Challenge partners and USGBC, we all play a role in this, and we welcome everyone on this call and in this organization to contribute to this broader movement around design and health, and tell us what you think and how we can best help supplement your project and work with you. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over. I think we're ready for questions here, and so I'll put Deb back on the line.
I just wanted to add one more thing. Besides the Well Building Standard, we also work with the hospitality and health wellness community to come up with solutions to some of your needs around wellness in the built environment. So.
Right, and Deborah brings up a really good point, and I'll just kind of touch it quickly. So Delos is our parent organization. We have several solutions that are available through Delos. One of those is the Well Building Standard. The Well Building Standard is run by the International Well Building Institute, predominantly as a subsidiary, which just allows us to share our IP and make sure that the certification process is done in the most robust manner that lives separate of our parent organization. And so that is why IWBI was set up to do that. But Delos offers really a breadth of other resources, and see ourselves as inviting many people into these kind of concepts around human sustainability and how we can work with you from everything from product development to, as Deborah mentioned, more of the industry that looks at hospitality issues as well.
Okay, so we'll start taking questions now. There's none in the box. So if you just type in the question or raise your hand, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you, Deborah. Did someone just have a question? Okay, I thought I was interrupting someone. Okay. Thank you so much. This is a fantastic presentation. I love the standard. I love the connection of health and sustainability, the 7 concepts. I actually had a question. This is Anka. Just kind of out of curiosity, have you gotten more interest outside the U.S., inside the U.S., and kind of where does that fall in terms of the awareness around these topics and the interest around these topics? And are the organizations that are interested in it organizations that have already done or gone through the LEED certification process, or are they doing this separately?
Oh, so was that a question?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, that was a question for me. Great. So what we basically right now, we are at 12 million square feet are registered in our system, and we are upwards of 100 million is our target for this year, to give you a sense. So we have a large pipeline. Clearly, these projects take a while. The initial projects largely were like LEED Platinum buildings, or they were already obtained LEED, and they called us, and what we did was we basically performed a gap analysis, which would tell you what do you need to do in order to get to WELL. So that was predominantly what we saw in the market. Now we're seeing some projects come online from the very beginning saying we want to pursue LEED and WELL. We definitely, I consider that, we kind of have a marriage with LEED in the sense we work really well together, but we absolutely can live separate of the LEED process. The trick in that becomes the air section in particular. So if you already have gone for LEED, a lot of that will be in place, particularly with your HVAC system. So it makes it easier. Not impossible, again, to get WELL. It just sort of depends. If we're coming into a pretty old system and you're a tenant, for example, and you don't potentially have a great relationship with the owner-developer, all of a sudden you're looking at some structural changes that can be challenging. So the ideal project tends to go for LEED and WELL, but that is not required. And I should also note there's certain, sorry, just one other note. So, we're definitely pursuing, from the international perspective, lots of clients that we're seeing, particularly in China, for example, Asia, Middle East. Those countries have different they might not use LEED, but they are very interested in WELL. So we definitely are adapting this conversation. So by no means are we exclusive to LEED.
Fantastic. And have you kind of seen that it's more office-based buildings are kind of adopting this? Because you mentioned obviously that you're focusing on hospitality and other sectors. Has there been an interest in one category more than another?
Sure, it's a great question. We released the commercial institutional standard, and that was in October. So predominantly that has been where our pilot program was. So we had lots of pilots that were going through before we publicly released the standard to the industry. So those that have been certified at this point, we have CBREs, that's definitely office. TD Bank is working towards certification, not almost complete, but that would be an example of bank. So Macquarie is also going that, they're almost completed certification. That's financial institution as well. Phipps Conservatory, that's a little bit different. So predominantly we're looking at that corporate commercial setting, but we've also had conversations and have doing pilot projects with Life Kitchen. They've been a great supporter of this. We also see projects with, for example, Cleveland Clinic, Akron Health, so there's kind of smaller MOB type scenarios that we're getting into. And I think we'll only see more of that as the pilot program builds out in the education, healthcare, kitchens, and restaurants. So the trick with that is, of course, those are all specialized building typologies. So it was critical for us to release the core standard before we've adopted those in different typologies. But as of right now, we are predominantly seeing corporate commercial go through. But if you have a different building typology and you are really interested in this is the time to tell us. It's the time to get involved because we're evolving those standards, and it's really critical to hear from the industry.
Wonderful. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions? If you do, you feel free to type them in the chat box. And if there's any follow-up questions, Whitney and Deborah, how would they be able to reach you?
If you have any questions, you can
email
Whitney at the email that's at the bottom of the slide.
I know Deborah quite well, so I'll get a hold of her as well if you guys have any questions. And maybe as we're just waiting for the end here, I should just sort of tell you guys a little bit about the research side of this. So if people are interested, we're really early on, but essentially we're very interested in capturing the impacts of built environment and health interventions and understanding what are those impacts on occupants. And so that's why Deborah's expertise in really understanding all different types of data sources, as well as different products that are in the market that we're using to collect data. We're getting very smart about this, so we're trying to move beyond the more traditional methods, like post-occupancy evaluations, to really think forward about how to collect information about building occupants. So that's kind of what we are up to, and would be happy to answer some questions on that. It's pretty early days for us, but also pretty exciting time.
Fantastic. And for those of you who are part of the Smarter DC Challenge, and if you're not, I hope you will be signing up soon. You can also get innovation points if you are looking at this. So definitely think about that in that context as well. So I'm not seeing any questions from anyone right now.
Anka, it looks like there's some questions in the questions bar. I'm seeing some. I'm not sure if.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, good.
Great. Yep. Let's see. Where or when might a scorecard be available so that those interested in pursuing WELL might be able to assess their standing?
Sure. So I'd encourage everyone on this call, if you're interested, your first step is to go to wellcertified.com, and we have a form that we'd like you to fill out, and that'll tell us, do you have a project? Are you generally interested? Do you want to come to a seminar? And that basically is the gateway into being able to download the standard, as well as downloading any of our additional tools. So one tool that is becoming available probably the next month is a very detailed Excel spreadsheet that would actually walk you through understanding each one of the requirements of the standard, and then you of course can compare that to your current project. That is still, they're finalizing that in development, but if you are specifically interested at this moment, we can just get you a copy of that because we have been circulating it, and that would be available. So also I should tell you, if you go through this website, it's the best way to get a hold of all of us because all that traffic's being directed to the right person. And we do not have newsletters nor something we're sending out every day at all. So you don't get signed up for that. Rather, it's just a way for us to understand and calibrate our, everything to certain audiences and make sure that if you're interested in coming to a workshop or hanging out with us or hearing updates, that we reach out to you in a timely manner. So that's the first step, and that'll get you the tool. And then if nothing else works, you can always reach out to me directly, and I'll connect you to some of my good friends and make sure to get you that via email.
Great, thanks. Les asks, how successful has it been to retrofit to a standard building, to retrofit a standard building to a well building?
So of course, my answer is going to be it depends. So what is that standard building? I think in best case scenarios, we've seen like TD Bank, for example, worked very closely with the developer. They retrofit several floors to become the well building standard. The challenge for them was the air quality issues with the HVAC system. And so the developer essentially stepped in to support that renovation was done to benefit the entire building. There are situations in which that's not always an option. So that becomes more of a challenge. But if you have a building that already is pretty well equipped and you don't need to go back to do all those additional changes, then you're definitely on your way to becoming certified. Predominantly for people is that actually 50% of the standard is protocols. And so surprisingly, you can get a bulk of the points really just by developing certain protocols and standards and practices in your work environment. So once you make sure that you're addressing the air and water, which can be a little bit more in the larger infrastructure issues, from there it goes really smoothly. We haven't had a lot of issues on that. But of course I have to say it depends because we see some dream projects and we see some not so dream projects that we work with. But also I'll tell you at this time, we are looking at those people that come in to work with us. We're really trying to offer a very high level of service. So if you find that there's an alternative way that you can address one of the intents, and like I said earlier, it's not the way we listed it, but you think you got a better way, we're very open to that. And I think as time goes on, those will develop more and more, but it's a pretty unique opportunity to work closely with us if you have an alternative path very early on as we continue to develop the standard.
And Whitney, Kara has a related question, essentially, how many criteria are operations-based versus building infrastructure? In other words, how difficult is it for existing buildings to meet the requirements? I think you answered most of that, but I wanted to share that question with you.
Right, so I don't have an exact number for you, but essentially if you look through the air and water section and the comfort section, that's where you're going to see most of the infrastructure issues. When you get into mind, fitness, nourishment, light, a lot of that can be operationally changed. Lights kind of verges on both sides of it. It just depends on the situation. But that tends to be sort of where the general breakdown is. Again, all of our projects at this point that have been registered were pre-existing buildings. So we're very used to this. We've gotten them all through registration. So that is our main building type right now.
Okay. Another question for you, compared to the Living Building Challenge, which requires the building to be active for 12 months to verify performance numbers, how does WELL manage its performance testing?
Sure. So basically, you can choose when you want performance verification to occur. Performance verification is separate from lead commissioning, from any other commissioning standard. So we would actually, your well assessor, which is assigned to you as soon as you register the project, they will be the one in charge of scheduling with you when they come on site to do performance verification. We ask that basically once you get the certificate of occupancy that you wait at least 1 month for us to come on site to do that. Your maximum amount of time is 5 years since the beginning, since you registered. Most of our clients clearly have a vested interest to go through the certification process as soon as possible. At the same time, we would advise you that, if you're still moving in, if there's lots of commotion, issues like air quality and construction, for example, or your nearby building is still going through construction. These are things that you want to be careful of, and you want to schedule your performance verification to address that. Clearly, we're sensitive of these issues. Don't do it the day you moved in, right? We're going to at least require that month out for you to become comfortable before we come through to do the performance verification. It is the most expensive part of the standard. So there is a lot of incentive that when we do it right, and we do it once. In fact, a lot of our clients are actually doing some pre-test before we get on site. And this is expensive because it requires people to come on site to do it. We also send a lot of this test away for third-party verification. And our hope too is, as the market supports this more, we'll see more competition on price points here as well.
Great. Next question. In Comfort 81 sound barriers, there are requirements to basically seal rooms in Part 3, which might cause unfortunate consequences for IAQ. Has this been considered?
Okay, well, I've got it in front of me, so let's go here. So 81, you're looking at sound barriers Part 3, wall construction methodology. So what specifically are you concerned about with IEQ?
Let's see, Lida, and if you could respond to that, that would be great. While we wait, I'll go to the next question.
Sure. I mean, I think that the answer really is that whenever you have a technical question, I will get you to go technicalsolutions@wellcertified.com. I don't want to provide an answer that depends on different project types, but my understanding on this too, you really want essentially. Actually, it's ironic because I'm now presenting in an office right now in which there's not good sound barriers, so the person next to me could hear probably everything I'm saying. So we are concerned with that, but clearly there is an airflow issue, right? And so that's sort of balanced in through the other features. So I think maybe if in general you're talking about trying to encapsulate certain pollutants in a space and not being able to ventilate that, and that sound barriers could contribute to that, potentially is what your concern is. So we do try to address that through the other requirements, for example, in the air quality section around requirements about ventilation rates, for example. And I think that's what it would address. And then anything more than that, I'd direct you to technical solutions to give you a specific answer.
Okay, we have a couple more questions, but just in the interest of time, since we just have one more minute left, I'm going to grab one more question that I think multiple participants might be interested in, which is how can we get more involved in helping with the WELL standard other than project work? Are there or will there be local and national WELL committees, volunteer opportunities for sustainability professionals?
What a great question. We love this question, and we want you to get involved. So you kind of have to bear with us. We are a growing family right now, and we want you to be part of our family. So these opportunities are starting to present themselves as we get bigger. We're partnering, like I said, with GBCI, and so you'll see us at Green Build for sure. So what I would say is the absolute way to get involved is to go through wellcertified.com. Tell us how you want to be involved. Tell us that you want to be part of a, we love our subject matter experts. They come in to help us review. They offer us input. They serve on committees as we're going through the WELL AP process. Let us know you have an expertise area. Let us know if you're interested in a workshop. Let us know if you'd like to be an instructor for WELL. Let us know if you want to go to one of these lunch and learns at a local area, and we will do our best to connect you. I really have a soft spot in my heart because when I first started in this field, was a health professional, I should say like a baby health professional trying to understand design, and I had no project. I don't even think I was like, ooh, can I even afford this LEED exam? Is this really the best use of my student funding? And I just kind of felt at this point where you're like, I want to get involved, but what do? I don't have an immediate next step. And so believe me when I say we are doing our best to try to create those opportunities. We are giving volunteer credit for people that want to come to Greenbuild. If you are a student listening in, please let us know. We would like to have you volunteer at Greenbuild and then get free entrance into the conference, and we will be having a well-curated track, which means all throughout Greenbuild you can come and hang out with us in what we are looking at to be a well-lit and more healthy space, which will be providing seminars on everything from acoustics to light to air quality. We'll be having a series of events and workshops. We'll be doing tours throughout that. Let us know that you want to come hang out with us. let us know your interest. Be a student, bring your friends, and definitely reach out to other health professionals to be part of that. So that's our best mechanism right now. And, like I said, bear with us. We're super excited, and we want you to be involved and let us know how we can do that best with you. And if nothing else, shoot me an email, and I'll do the best I can to direct you to some folks that can help.
Great. Thank you so much, Whitney and Deborah. This has been fantastic. I know I've said that a couple times, and I mean it. So again, if you have any questions, be sure to go to wellcertified.com or email Whitney. And if you have any questions about the Smarter DC Challenge, you can email us at sdc@smarterdcchallenge.com. And we're happy to answer any questions for that. And I think that wraps it up for today.
Thank you.
Thanks again, everyone, for participating. And Whitney and Deborah, thanks again.
All right. Be well. Thanks, guys.
Have a great day.
Bye.